there is a way for you to expand your impact, whether that's in clinic or beyond. And it's not that I'm pushing you one way or the other. It's that as someone who's dedicated your life to the benefit of others and foregone that other profession, invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into your education, you deserve to know what your options are to make the best decision for you, your mission, your family, yourself.
Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. I'm your host, Julia, a PT turned product professional, joined by my delightful partner in crime co-hosts, Emma.
This is my tribe. This is how I think.
And Emily.
That is the best getting into PT story I've ever heard.
Founders of the Clinician Transition. Each episode, we interview former rehab professionals who have leveraged their clinical skills into non-traditional roles. I invite you to come hear the journeys, follow the career paths, and learn about the opportunities beyond these clinic walls. On today's episode, we are joined by Jonathon Lee. Jon is a physical therapist who co-founded NextDegree, an AI-powered job search platform for clinicians. NextDegree helps clinicians discover and match with healthcare and tech companies that will be a good fit for them based on their background and interests. Jon's passion is helping clinicians find fulfilling healthcare jobs after his personal journey through healthtech, medtech, pharma, and startups. NextDegree's goal is to eliminate the hassles of the job search, endless scrolling, ghosting, and the frustration clinicians experience along the way. Jon is an advisor at the Techstars Accelerator and VC firm VentureBlick. He holds an MBA from the University of Oxford, a DPT from Virginia Commonwealth University, and completed his residency and fellowship training in Houston, Texas. Reach out to him at Jon Lee PT on LinkedIn. Also joining me on today's episode is Alex Lee. Born to Korean parents and raised in Panama, Alex has had truly a multicultural upbringing. He studied history and economics at UPenn before obtaining his DDS at UCLA. Alex practiced as a pediatric dentist for 7 years before making the switch to product management. Today, Alex brings a blend of clinical experience, technical understanding, and a user-centered approach to product development. I am delighted that he accepted my invitation to help me co-host this episode with Jon. I hope you enjoy and happy listening. Well, welcome to Beyond These Clinic Walls. It's great to have you here. I feel like we had like 12 icebreakers, but I was going to say you had brought up before we started recording how you're doing a house swap with someone who's on their eat, pray, love journey. And I was like, well, it's also the holiday time. I feel like that is the exact plot of like every rom-com out there. So you might find yourself like in the middle of a rom-com and falling in love with like Jude Law now that you've moved to New York City in this house swap. So don't be surprised if Jude Law comes like knocking on your door with a cute little scarf on.
Shocking Jude Law showing at my front door and be like,
yeah. But Jon, welcome to our show. It's great to have you here. And it's also great to have my guest host, Alex, as well.
What's up?
My first question I ask all of our guests is the tell me about yourself question. And we're going to dive in to the depths of your experience and your career journey, but just like high level, maybe give us like the chapter highlights of your journey.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good to be here. You know, it's great to speak to you guys and love what you guys are doing with your podcast. My name's Jon. I'm currently the co-founder of a company called NextDegree. And our mission is to help clinicians find jobs they love so that they can build careers they love, whether that's in the clinic or beyond. And my journey to this process has been like a lot of other clinical folks that I've spoken to, where over the past 10 years or so, I've been on the search for that job I love and how I can find that job and make a greater impact on not only my patients, but our communities and healthcare as a whole. And my background, I'm actually a physical therapist. And much like many teenage boys back in the day, you know, I went into work with athletes. I got my PT degree. I went the residency and fellowship route. And I worked for several years treating athletes of all kinds, from weekend warriors all the way up to NFL and Major League Baseball players. I did that for a few years and then really felt a calling towards community health. You know, I come from an immigrant family, and I felt that sometimes when you have different situations in life, you also deserve to get just as good care as you could. So I made the switch to community health while I was living in Portland, Oregon. I worked at an outpatient orthopedic center, and my caseload evolved from sports into things like women's health and oncology and autoimmune diseases. And, I had patients that were panhandling for bus fare and things like that. And I loved it. I felt like I was really making an impact on people in my immediate community who, one, really needed it, but two, again, were part of my community and I wanted our community to thrive. While I was doing this, I started a mentorship program, almost like a mini residency program. We created an entire year of coursework. I built tests, built curriculums, did all that stuff. And I was able to filter out these things I learned in pro sports down to our community, which is great. But much like the thousands of other clinical colleagues that we have, my story takes a left turn at COVID. And I remember treating during the early days of the pandemic, especially with patients going through chemotherapy and patients who were immunosuppressed, and really thinking, oh my goodness, we don't have enough information. My staff and I, we're treating maybe 100 patients a day if we're lucky, but 1 million people around the world are getting infected with COVID. Like, how can we do more? And especially for those patients who may not be as fortunate or have as many resources as other patients I had seen in my previous experience working in that pro sports sphere. So in April 2020, I saw a news article that said Oxford was developing the first COVID vaccine with AstraZeneca. And so I made the split decision to apply to the University of Oxford to get into that healthcare ecosystem, because I figured if they were getting billions of dollars of funding, and at the time they were the top medical school of the world, this could be where the future of healthcare came from. So I applied for my MBA at Oxford, very short term, quit my job, sold my house, drove across the country to drop my dog off in Virginia at my
so
house.
Sad. Yeah.
And I remember getting my visa August 26th, and I flew out the 27th, and I started school September 1st. And it all sounds great, but I didn't really think it through. So imagine having this kind of half-baked idea, just kind of following your white coat oath and wanting to help more people and figuring out how to do that. And then you sell everything, you go to a foreign country you've never been to before, and then you're stuck there. That was a crazy time. Oxford's an amazing place. It's been a great university for almost 1,000 years now. And at that time, they were going through so much innovation, not only in drug development, but in health tech and med tech and things like that. And so I started out as a founder's associate at a health tech startup, finished that up, and went on to become a venture consultant at a med tech startup. And then where things really turned was I got my big break as an intern to Bayer Pharmaceuticals under the chief medical officer. And that was a sign of healthcare I'd never seen before, because I think many physical therapists really aren't in tune with pharmacology. So you choose to be a physical therapist, and then going to work for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, definitely a different experience, especially at that senior executive level. I was fortunate to work on the digital transformation team, which exposed me to technology that I had never dreamt of, right? Not even just drug development, but things like genomic digital twins and these massive data lakes of patient data and illness data they had to try to create more precision medicines during COVID and beyond. And so that was a crazy time. I learned a lot. The good thing about Oxford and Cambridge is their 1-year MBAs, and way back when the World Health Organization said that they anticipated it'd be 3 to 5 years to get out of COVID if everything went well. So I chose that program also because it was 1 year. And so in 2021, when I graduated, we were still in COVID. So I decided to go full-time into consulting. Specifically, I went to go work for a really great consulting firm in London called Idea Pharma, which works with big pharma, small pharma, biotechs, et cetera, on these really amazing, long shot, life-saving cures of the future that'll come out at the end of the decade. And so I spent the next 2 years working in that drug development space during the pandemic to help use what I saw in clinic and try to make new medicines for the future. But then, COVID ended, and I'm still a clinician at heart. I still identify as a clinician. I have my PT license still, et cetera. And so I decided to leave my job in London and to come back to the US, where I started NextDegree with 2 amazing people I met from Oxford who are from Mexico and from the Philippines.
And this is a question that Alex had kind of brought up, so I might pass it to him a little bit. Going back to when you were first in the clinic and you wanted to make that jump when you were in the community health spot, maybe walk us through a little bit, what was going through your head? What were you feeling like in that time frame, and what made it okay for that jump?
And then, John, I'll add to that. And the reason why I'm so curious about this is me personally as a dentist. When I talk to other dentists, a lot of clinicians, just like us, they're not really happy with their current situation as a clinician, as a dentist. But when I further question them, it's okay, you don't like what your situation right now. Is there anything that you would rather be doing? And the question is yes, but I don't know what, right? And so there's this like underlying sentiment that's like brewing, but not a lot of people get past that stage just because they don't have an idea of what to do or they don't know what else they could do. So long question short, just curious like what your emotional state was and if you went through those doubts kind of as you were deciding to make this huge jump.
Absolutely. I think those are great questions. And it's hard to break the consultant mindset as well, right? So I'll break this into two parts. And the first part...
I have a framework for answering this
give
question.
Us a framework, John.
Let me walk through it.
I think the first bit I want to talk about is inspiration. And the second bit I want to talk about is professional fulfillment. I've been really blessed. Like through this journey, the last 3 to 4 years, I think I've probably spoken to almost 1,000 clinicians around the world who've reached out to me, and I try to help them as much as I can, understand themselves and also understand where their place is and understand what their path towards the future, what they want to create looks like, right? I find something that happens often is people are so focused on execution. What do I do next? How do I do this? How do I do that? Without asking themselves, like, is this right for me? This is really fascinating to me because if I think about my story as a physical therapist, how did I become a physical therapist? I grew up as a minority in a very rural part of America. And I was inspired by a physical therapist who treated me for a sports injury that made me want to become a physical therapist, right? And I think this is really important because the first step in achieving your dreams is knowing that you can have the confidence to know that someone like you has done it. Someone like you can support you in doing this, and you're not alone, right? So this first step, I think, about how do you plan your path actually involves finding your tribe and being inspired by others who have done what you've done and have done things that you did not think were possible to inspire you to do the work to get to that path. And that's one thing I love about this podcast, right? Because so often it's so easy to ask you these questions like, oh, what was your background? What is your job title? What advice would you give yourself? And really the first step in my mind is letting people know that you're not alone and letting people know that there are other options out there and not pushing people to do something that you want them to do, but rather giving them the information so that they can make a choice that's right for themselves, their families, and their professional careers. And I think
I did not pay John to say all of that at all, but that is spot on. Sorry to interject too, but exactly what you said, John, for the visibility point on it too. I think to be inspired, you have to have visibility. And that's also another mission of this podcast is to see someone and say, when I grow up, I want to be Alex or John. Here's something I might be able to do, or I love what they're doing, but I could put my own creative twist and journey on it and make it my own story and career. So yes, yes. And
I wish I had this podcast when I was going through COVID in 2020 because that was like a crazy time. But I want to get to that second point, which is professional fulfillment, right? For me, a lot of what I like to do is exposing people to the blue sky of what could be. Because again, that first step is inspiration. A negative externality of this is a lot of people get the false impression that I did not like my clinical job or that I think clinical jobs are in any way, shape, or form not as good as tech or startup jobs or things like that. And that's not true at all. I actually remember vividly a conversation I had with a very close friend of mine who is from India. I met him at Oxford and he said, yeah, everyone who goes to the MBA didn't like their previous job. And for me, I was actually really angry. And I don't get angry very often. I spoke to him. I was like, we're friends. I'm going to tell you.
We're going to take this outside.
I love treating patients. I love patient care. But if you think about that first day in PT school or medical school or nursing school, what do? You take your Hippocratic oath to do no harm and to help your community. And for me, I saw this opportunity where there was a global pandemic, right, at a multi-million person scale. And if my staff and I were treating 100 people a day, could we do more, right? And patient care is incredibly noble. it's incredibly impactful. It's important. It's the greatest job in the world because you make changes that you see immediately and over a long term and build those relationships, right? But at the same time, it's not scalable in its current iteration. And so for me, what I do in terms of professional fulfillment and how I've built my career actually all stems to that time as a clinician. How can I make the biggest impact on the most people, knowing that I believe that clinicians are smart, patients need us, and that all we're looking for is a guide or a template or an inspiration to go do great things? Because I've heard many clinicians use something to the effect of, oh, I'm not good enough for this role. I'm not good enough to do this. And my response is, dude, you save lives. Like you went through at times 7, 8, 9, 10 years of school. You deal with the most difficult patient problems enveloped into biopsychosocial issues. And you think you're not good enough or smart enough to learn Excel? Like that's ridiculous, right? So in terms of self-fulfillment, I think it really comes back to there is a way for you to expand your impact, whether that's in clinic or beyond. And it's not that I'm pushing you one way or the other. It's that as someone who's dedicated your life to the benefit of others and foregone that other profession, invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into your education, you deserve to know what your options are to make the best decision for you, your mission, your family, yourself.
I have a little bit of a curveball to throw at you, and it just came to me as you were answering that, because you are a very good storyteller. After you know yourself and you spend the time to realize what your strengths are and how you can find like your self-worth and how you can deliver impact, you have to be able to articulate and communicate that story back to people. You're very good at doing this. What tips do you have for people for telling their story?
Oh, I can think of the pivot point immediately, and it's not sexy and it's not crazy. So when I was starting out my career, I was trying to get into that pro sports space. I'm not really active on social media other than LinkedIn, just because I'm trying to disseminate information, but I don't really have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that. I was really worried that I would lose all my friends. Because if you get rid of social media and I was moving across the country, how would you contact them, right? So I did a couple things. The thing that really changed my storytelling ability was I started a document. I think at the time it was just a notepad document because Google Document wasn't out, but Google Docs wasn't out yet. But every day I tried to summarize my day in one sentence. That's it. And I did it for a year. Okay. And after a year, I still actually have this notepad document, right? I went through it and I tried to understand and reflect on what I was feeling at the time, whether it was really important, whether it was really not. And from there, that really helped me understand both by what I wrote and what I didn't write, because it's very hard to summarize your day in one sentence, right? And that was the beginning for me. And then from there, I kept tabs on my friends. And I realized that, when you're young, you're really looking at horizontal relationships. Like in high school, even in college, you're trying to be friends with everybody, right? But as you get older, life gets crazy. You get married, you have kids, you have a job. Your bandwidth for this horizontal relationships really is challenged, right? But what I found is by getting rid of social media at that time for me allowed me to build deeper vertical relationships, because if I wanted to talk to someone, I couldn't scroll through their feed. I would actually have to call them or text them or Zoom them in today's age, right? And you'd be surprised, because not only from disconnecting and understanding yourself, you'd be amazed at who reaches out to you as well, right? And that's what's really valuable. Again, it's finding people you can trust and you can learn from and you can grow with, because life is hard, right? But life is also a lot of fun.
Yeah. And John, that's interesting, because I think you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast recording right now, you said, as clinicians, we're kind of always looking for that next step, that next action item. But in a lot of ways, for this journey, it starts with a moment of self-reflection. And kind of when you talk about that exercise of summarizing your day, that's kind of how I started out too. Like really asking myself and looking within before trying to do more things that I wasn't 100% behind, right? So I think that's wisdom right there. I think that's good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I love that exercise too. That's what that's the Seinfeld way, Jerry Seinfeld. More or less. He writes every day, and his goal is to write in the book every day. But I like the idea of trying to fit it all into one sentence. You have to have some strong word economy and really think through your communication skills on that. Also, what a nice way to reflect and like see the progress you've made, because some days you probably felt like you were crawling at a snail's pace, and then to have like 1% better each day doesn't seem like a lot, but when you add it up, you have a lot of percent.
I just want to say that's the reason why I reached out to you, Jon, separate and apart from this podcast, because it was like, I saw NextDegree, your startup that you're working on, and talking about community and finding your tribe. It's like when I was trying to make my transition, what I struggled with was finding role models, right? I'm like, who's walked this path before that could give me some like advice? Like I couldn't find anyone. And I don't know, that could be a good segue into you talking about like your vision for NextDegree and kind of how it came about. I'd love to hear about, that whole thing.
Absolutely. I think vision is rich. I think I'm doing what every clinician has always tried to do, which is teach students, teach your peers, learn from them, and work towards a common goal. Clinicians, to a certain extent right now, are not being used to their full capabilities. They're not being used to their full intellect or their full creativity. They're being used to paper over existing problems across healthcare systems, which is helping cause them to burn out. Because if you think about the type of person that becomes a clinician, a doctor, a nurse, a physical therapist, etc., you are automatically self-selecting for someone who is empathetic, for someone who is generous, and someone who is diligent, right? They know that they could be bankers or consultants or engineers, that they willingly choose to exchange many years of their youth in search of a dream to help people. And while they're in school, you throw so much information at them. You learn about cardiology and pulmonology, and you learn about orthopedics and musculoskeletal systems and gross anatomy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're creating this environment, this stimuli-rich environment that has attracted these empathetic, diligent people. But then you go to a care setting where, because of high volume or EMRs that don't work or all the gunk around patient care, you're putting them into a system that is highly repeatable and doesn't have much flex for creativity. If you have a population that you self-selected for creativity, you throw overstimulation at them for years, and then you put them in a lower stimulation environment, it makes sense that they would get bored or burn out or change their perspective. But what if you could add a little bit more stimulation to these people who know the problems intimately, amidst all the problems that we see in healthcare, and instead of pointing out problems, you could work together to create solutions? This is the idea behind NextDegree. The idea behind NextDegree is that healthcare has so many problems that clinicians need to be part of the solutions, whether that's in clinic or whether that is outside of clinic on larger scale infrastructure issues. But the beauty of it is each person should be able to decide if given the right information and the path to do it. And so this is kind of like the macro vision of NextDegree. How do we utilize technology to take the best parts of the healthcare profession together so that they can find jobs they love? And they can learn about and connect with traditional and futuristic companies whose mission is to change healthcare at scale, so we can link the companies changing healthcare with the people they need to do it.
If you want to tell us, for the listeners out there who might not be familiar with it, exactly what is NextDegree? How you framed it so far, it's this opportunity for connecting the right clinicians to the right opportunities. But how do you make it so that those clinicians are on the right journey, that they're making the right decisions by connecting to the right opportunities?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because especially in the AI age, there's so many buzzwords. At NextDegree, we're building software for healthcare. Specifically, we're building software for the companies changing healthcare and the people they need to do it, clinicians. What this means is that clinicians can go to NextDegree, they can log in, they can put in some very basic information, and at the click of a button, we reveal the entire ecosystem of healthcare for you. Not only healthcare, but the tech adjacent fields, healthtech, medtech, biotech, femtech, etc. In addition, our AI has identified which companies your medical background would be a powerful value add at. For example, let's say you're a physical therapist. Well, boom, digital MSK companies are a great fit for you. And we've already done all the filtering. We've done all the searching. We found all the companies, and we've taken all the information about the companies, gotten rid of all the jargon like hypergrowth, Series A, etc., and created easy to read and digest 100 to 150 word synopses of each company. So at the click of a button, you can find out not only where you are, but where you want to go. Because when you think about the tools out there right now, like Monster and LinkedIn, et cetera, they're not exactly built for healthcare. They tell you where you are as a token of what you can do. We're giving clinicians the freedom to say, hey, this is where I want to go. I want to go into digital health. These are the companies in digital health. These are the things that they do. This is how they sit in the greater landscape. Hey, they're founded by clinicians, or hey, they're founded by scientists. We've also compiled guides and information from clinicians around the world who have done these same things. For example, let's say you want to be a product manager. I'll be very honest, product and consulting are probably the two toughest transitions for clinicians, but there are lots of people that have done it. Who better to learn from with your perspective as a clinician who wants to go into product manager than a clinician who is a product manager? If we can learn from each other about clinical things, why not non-clinical things too? So what NextDegree is a software for people working in healthcare to find jobs they love, either now or in the future, along with adjacent resources so that you can plot your path and turn that job you love into a career you love with you at the helm and in control of it.
I have a lot of half-baked ideas that are just like running through my brain day in and day out, right? But what I find like unfathomable, it's like, how do I, like, what's step one after having that idea of actually getting something done like you did with NextDegree, right? Just curious, like for you, what was step one after crazy idea?
Oh man, this is a great question. It's so simple for me, it hurts. And I hope this answers your question. But when I was a kid, I have Asian parents, right? You know, Asian parents have the stereotype of being very tough, very critical, et cetera. And my parents are great, I love them. But I remember being like 4 or 5 years old, and my mom, she took to the library because I was asking her a bunch of questions. I was that curious. Stop.
She's like, look it up.
Yeah, my mom literally says, Jonathon, excuse me, because when I'm in trouble, she's using my full name, right? You're not as smart as you think you are. Someone smarter than you and older than you has had the same problem, figured it out, and written a book about it. So rather than beating your head against the wall, and I'm paraphrasing here, just go figure out how they did it and adapt it. And I guess now that would be YouTube or whatever, right? So for me, what was really important was, how do I build a safe to fail environment? Meaning, how do I find someone who I will openly say, hey, I don't know much about this, but I'm trying to learn. Will you teach me? And so that's how this whole thing got started. You know, I reached out to like people in products like Jules and yourself. I reached out to people in finance and tech and full stack development. It's like, hey, I'm not an expert in this. I'm trying to learn. I know you're super busy. Could you spare 10 minutes just so I could learn from you? And here are some specific questions, you know, if that works for you. And building that fail safe environment is really important. And I think that's hard because clinicians are inherently perfectionists, right? Again, if you think back about to our white coat oath, like our first rule is do no harm, which means we are inherent perfectionists because if we do it wrong, someone can get hurt, right? But the business and the tech world is not like that. You literally just change a line of code and see what happens, right? Like at the worst case scenario, your product doesn't work. Maybe your company goes under, which is bad, but no one dies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think this mindset shift is actually really challenging for clinicians to really accept that they don't have to be perfect and that they can hack solutions on their way to a better outcome, because it's really beaten into us that we need to do no harm, which is not a bad thing.
You stole my mojo on that one. I wrote fail fast and say fail and failing.
Yeah.
And failing is good. Failing, I have to fail. I fail all the time. Fail daily. And it's definitely a mental twist from coming from the clinic and being a type A person.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me like our dental school professors, they would always talk about the measure twice, cut once type of framework, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, in technology, it's just kind of like initial discovery, figure it out, do it. If it fails, you learned. Succeeds, cool. Next experiment, But yeah, it's definitely it's a polar opposite in mindset, which, yeah.
But this discovery phase, clinicians actually don't realize they are really good at this, right? And I'll give you 2 examples. Number one, when you're thinking about being a dentist or a physical therapist or something, what did you do? You reached out to dentist or physical therapist and said, hey, I don't know anything about your field, but I'm kind of interested in it. Can I talk to you? It's the same workflow, even though now you're maybe using LinkedIn or you're going to your local church, right? I think that is something that people kind of forget. It's like, you know how to do this, right? The words are different, the tools are different, but the strategy, you know how to do. And then on top of that, I actually think, and this is my opinion, that it's really, really important to have at least a few years of clinical experience, right? It's great to learn the theory in school, but actually practicing that with patients is super, super important because you learn how to find information and to find sources of problems. I'll give you a great example. As a physical therapist, how many patients would come to me and say, I need surgery? Cool. All right. Are you sure? Why? And you work with your patient and you actually discover, you work through the issues and you realize the reason why they think they need surgery is because they can't work. They're the only worker in their home. Their shoulder hurts. They think they need surgery to work. But then you dig a little deeper, you dig a little deeper, you dig a little deeper. And this is a true story, by the way. Why does their shoulder hurt? The pain is neurologic because of stress, because this patient's son just got deported by ICE. So think about that. You started this idea of a patient coming and telling you what they need, and you discovered the processes and the layers underneath to help get to a better solution. Don't be the patient coming in asking for surgery. Like, I want to be a product manager. That's all well and good. That works sometimes. But really, it's more about the layers underneath. Why does your shoulder hurt? Is it neurologic? Is it orthopedic? Is it stress related? Is your best treatment right now surgery? Is your best treatment like getting you some services at home through your community center or pro bono legal services so you can get your family back together, right? Is product management really what you want to do? Or are you more interested in bringing a product to life through UI, UX design? You're more interested in being able to scope out whether a product will be valuable to a patient or community, user research or not, etc. And understanding which bits of the problem that you uncovered is really helpful to find out where your starting place could be. So one of the books that changed my life was this book called Build the Damn Thing by Catherine Finney. Catherine Finney is an amazing woman. Okay, she is a Yale-trained epidemiologist who started a website in the 2000s called The Budget Fashionista. Built this company, sold it, is now a venture capitalist, invests in other companies. But the reason why I love this book is because this book is written from the perspective of the rules of the game are a bit different if you're not uber wealthy. Specifically, if you're a minority, if you're a woman, if you're from a disadvantaged background, the rules of the game are a bit different for starting a company than someone who has a trust fund or things like that. And I love this book because it lays out in vivid detail how to turn your idea into a company step by step without spending your life savings. Because especially with student loan debt or with children or mortgage, especially if you don't come from a wealthy background, the cost of failure is so much higher. So I would highly recommend that book. It's called Build the Damn Thing by Catherine Finney. I think it was Book of the Year by McKinsey in 2022 or something like that. I bought a used copy online for like $8 and it was amazing.
I cheated a little and I scrolled down and I just ordered it while you were, even before you got to it. Because I was like, I'm sold. Whenever John's saying like it's coming Friday, so I'm looking forward to it.
Alex, I was gonna get you one as a thank you for being my guest host.
I mean, I can cancel it. I can cancel it.
I'll just Venmo you it.
Yeah. I'll Venmo request.
It really amazes me the number of experts I see online. I see people who are experts in Web3 or experts in AI, and experts in blockchain, et cetera, right? And I'm not saying these experts don't exist, but for a rapidly evolving nascent industry, I find it hard to believe that there are 10,000 experts in every city in this rapidly growing nascent industry. Because I do not believe AI will replace clinicians. But what I do think is that clinicians who use and understand AI will replace the ones that don't. It's gotten to the point now for me, and I'm sure you guys are the same, that it's very easy to see which posts are created by ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who really uses in conclusion in colloquial conversation, right? Who really uses thrilled and inspired to describe a conversation or a webinar that they saw? I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying it's like probably far less than you would think. So AI is growing rapidly, but it's far from mature. And I would say that it's easier to get a general understanding of AI than it is to get a deep understanding of clinical medicine. And so for me, I just want to say, I think clinicians, especially the ones that grew up with the internet, you are in a great position to learn about AI. And even that's a buzzword. So things like digital twins and condensed treatment algorithms and data lakes and APIs and all these other words that seem like gibberish. But once you understand that an API just connects two sets of information, then you know, oh, okay, well, then if I have an EMR and I have a predictive health algorithm, all an API does is allows me to take information from that EMR to make my predictive algorithm for pneumonia better. And clinicians know where that's used because they know which indications will have pneumonia. They know which patients are at risk for pneumonia, and they know exactly how much pneumonia costs, both in terms of cost of care and human cost.
John, I think the reason why there's so many AI experts is because the Web3 experts became AI experts overnight.
Yeah. But there are experts. There are experts. It's just like, I just don't know if there's that many of them.
Yeah.
No, you gotta sift through.
Yeah.
But
I do think you make a great point where you need to read about and consume information about AI with a healthy dose of skepticism.
For sure.
But understanding it might not directly replace like clinicians or product managers or designers, but those that know how to leverage AI, those are the ones who will be able to like get a head start on a lot of these things.
Yeah, you got to build your Jarvis.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a great point that you made there, John. Yeah. I 100% agree.
Because it's a nascent growing field, that means people are doing tons of research on it. So literally, you can look up a systematic review for AI in healthcare and literally just read it. And that's your starting point. Write down all the words you know, all you don't know. Think about the interesting use cases and then use that to start your journey, right? But rapidly nascent, evolving industries are constantly being researched to gather more information about them. This information is freely available. Like Google Scholar is amazing, right? So use that to start versus like blog posts and things like that.
It's time for the show and tell. Woohoo!
So I'd like to talk about, for my show and tell, the global healthcare workforce crisis. And I think you see glimmers of it in the news. There's a clinician shortage. There's not enough nurses, not enough doctors. There's an aging population, et cetera. But I'd like to go a bit deeper into that. Healthcare, in terms of economics, is an inelastic good. People will always need it. And what that means is people will always get sick. People will always get injured. And they'll still need healthcare professionals and services to help bring them back to function, performing, thriving, whatever it is, whatever word you want to use. The challenge with this is if you have a declining supply, or a reduction in clinicians, but demand stays the same, price goes up, right? There's the same demand for something, there's less of ways to get it, it's going to cost more. And I think this is really, really, really important to talk about, especially considering what's going on in healthcare right now with rising prices in the US, with strikes around the world in the UK and France, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that people have mentioned to me is, why are you building NextDegree? Why are you doing this? We don't have enough clinicians as it is. Healthcare costs are going up, yet you're taking them out of clinical care to put them into startups. And I really don't agree with this on many levels, but there's three main reasons why I don't agree with this statement. And as an overarching message, I think clinical careers are great, but what's missing is the information for every clinician to understand their situation, make the best decision for them in terms of their passions, their careers, and how they want to make an impact. And having this information and allowing them as smart, independent practitioners to make this choice is a different thing than saying you should go work in a startup. But going back to that, I disagree with this idea of taking clinicians out of care for startups for three main reasons. The first one, very basically, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's already a scarcity of clinicians. A subset of them are interested in non-clinical roles. That does not mean they are not valued members of the community. In fact, I would venture to say that these first movers are the risk takers who are looking for an opportunity to fix problems they see with solutions that don't exist currently. And with all the myriad problems of healthcare, excluding any member of our profession, whether they are clinical or non-clinical, I believe is fundamentally wrong. Healthcare should be an inclusive profession, and that encompasses more than just race, gender, etc. It also encompasses ideology. And excommunicating these risk takers who know the problems of our profession when we need them most, I think is crazy. I think it's crazy. And the reason why I think it's crazy is because of the second reason, which is we need to acknowledge that this new generation of healthcare professionals is looking for something different in their careers than previous generations, myself included, were. You can find tons of literature in both the academic community and online about the boomerang generation, where employees will leave companies and come back. I think this is really important in the context of healthcare because you have these first movers who are interested in non-clinical roles in, for example, tech-enabled fields, who are bringing the experiences of healthcare with them to this new industry or challenge. And the assumption of previous generations that you'll work in one job for the rest of your life does not hold true for this new generation of workers. In fact, we're starting to see it now through our data at NextDegree that a lot of these earlier first movers into tech-based careers are moving back into healthcare, into hospital leadership, into telehealth programs for major hospitals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you think about this massive scope of problems of healthcare, you have one, excommunicated this group of first movers because they're non-clinical, who have gone on to tech or finance or whatever, and are coming back to their first industry or career, et cetera. Think about all the things that they've learned. Think about all the things they've learned in product, in finance, in tech, et cetera, that they're going to bring back as the boomerang generation to an aging, archaic system that everyone knows is trying to change, but is trying to allocate resources and trying to allocate talents to help it change, right? So number one, DEI. We should not exclude anybody. Number two, the boomerang generation, because this also leads to cross-pollination of skills as these professionals come back due to generational differences. And finally, last but not least, let's talk about the data. Healthcare workforce attrition, especially post-COVID, is a hot topic. You can find tons of resources online about how people are leaving healthcare professions, blah, 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 blah. But no one talks about retention, right? How do we retain these people? And again, people will reach out to me and they say, oh, by showing them these other careers, they're never going to come back, right? And I don't think that's true. When I was working in the UK in drug development during the pandemic, I met this amazing surgeon. His name is Tony Young. He's a urologist from the UK. He works in the NHS. And about 10 years ago, he started this program in the UK's NHS called the Clinical Entrepreneur Program. I recommend everyone to look it up. It's fascinating. What this program is an NHS-sponsored program in collaboration with East Anglia University, a university in England, where clinicians, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, etc., can apply and learn non-clinical skills, right? It's almost like a mini MBA. You learn about marketing and product and tech enablement and things like that. Because Dr. Young realized that a lot of the problems of healthcare require clinical expertise to help solve. In this program, they've been gathering data for the last decade or more. And what they found is that this program, its members who were thinking about leaving the NHS actually ended up staying at the NHS because of this program. Because by teaching them non-clinical skills, they found unique and applicable ways to solve problems. Specifically, a third of these clinicians who thought about leaving ended up staying. Think about that for a second. What workforce program do we have in the US right now that is limiting clinical attrition by a third? I can't think of one. On top of that, of the 2/3 that left, many, many, many of them, and I think the number is over half, started new companies or created new innovations that were then later adopted by the NHS to improve patient care and workflows. Now, this is not to say the NHS is perfect, nor is it to say that the UK and the US healthcare systems are similar, because they're not. But as a data point, I think it's really interesting to think about and to try to apply here back home. Because if you can teach clinical experts non-clinical skills who already know intricately these workflows and these problems of healthcare, imagine the changes you could create by having a different perspective on existing problems.
This has been a wonderful discussion. This has been so great. Jon, you're a great storyteller. You are inspirational, and I am thrilled. I'm going to use all the words that ChatGPT would throw out here right now. I'm completely enthralled in this entire discussion. No, but I truly am. And I thank you for all that you've been doing and have done for the professions out there and all clinicians. You've done so much for us. Is there anything that we can do for you, either on this podcast or anyone listening?
I would say just keep interviewing amazing guests. Number two, I'm super proud to be a partner with you guys. Please check out NextDegree if you're thinking about building that career you love. And always let us know what features you'd like to see, because we're constantly building, we're constantly iterating. We're doing some amazing things, I think, but it doesn't really matter unless it's helpful to all of you guys out there, because we need all of us together to go create that healthcare future that we want to see. One thing that I'm really, really excited about is the support and expertise from the rest of our clinical community. And we've actually created a blog. It's medium.com/nextdegree, where clinicians, Alex included, have written guides on how they made the transition to product or senior medical advisor, or how they built their health tech MVP for free, along with free resources and other things to help you along your way. So I would definitely say, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn. Definitely check out the blog. There's so much stuff on there, and I can't take credit for that. Most of that comes from our community. And at the same time, if you are a clinician either thinking about a pivot, or you're a clinician who's post-pivoted and you want to get your story out, you want to help others, let me know, and happy to disseminate your information to everybody else in Asia and the US and Europe as well. And definitely listen to this podcast.
Thank you. And Jon, if you can join me in a round of applause for Alex for being my wonderful guest host on today's show. Shout out to you as well, because this was an awesome discussion. And thanks for being there when I couldn't come off mute fast enough.
No, thanks for including me. And I'm so happy to be part of this. And I'm honestly rooting for NextDegree. I'm rooting for Beyond the Clinic Walls. I love everything both of you guys are doing. So thank you again for including me.
Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of the Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. As always, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Beyond These Clinic Walls for all the latest updates and episode releases. Make sure to join the Clinician Transition group on LinkedIn and Slack to be part of the networking community for like-minded rehab professionals. Questions, comments, concerns, or do you know someone who might make an excellent guest on our next show? Reach out to us at beyondtheseclinicwalls@gmail.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.